once you're aware of the core wound or the shadow side of your expression of your true desires, because it's not coming out as the way you want it, it's coming out as a shadow, you then are aware of what those parameters are that's causing it to be like that. And you can actually dig into that, and you can go into a deeper state of awareness, and actually change the imprint and begin to attenuate the momentum.
You're listening to the Octave Leap Podcast, a coherent vision for the future of business.
Welcome back to the Octave Leap Podcast. You're here today with yours truly, your host, David Kahn. And today, we're going to dive into something that is fundamental to both life, business, relationships, you name it. And that really is our overall attitude. I talked a few podcasts ago about how our DNA, which is responsible for the release of different hormones in the body and the electrochemical signals sent to the brain that, go down different neural pathways and create different sensations in the nervous system, how all of that is determined by primarily the closest thing in our environment, which is our heart, because our heart is pulsating with electromagnetic pulsations, and it's of a nature of our emotional frequency. So it's really our attitude that kind of gets laced in there. So our attitude sort of determines the emotional quality that gets pulsated outward throughout the body, reverberates around, and our genetics get changed as a result of that. So in many ways, this is quite a cliched line, but attitude is everything. Well, it actually physiologically is. Sometimes the problem with these like bite-sized little like things that look good on a motivational poster is it kind of distills out the main point, but because it's such a quick passing thing, it's like it gets lost on us. It's kind of like, you can go to YouTube and you can listen to an MP3 of any song that you can think of pretty much. But like 50 years ago, if you wanted to hear a certain song, it's like you might have to like make a trek to the record store, see if they have it in stock, order it, wait for it, get it. And in that process of preparation, the work is often done. You're preparing yourself to receive the thing. So today, when I say attitude is everything, I want to establish the context for that allows you to receive that statement. Because it is simple. It's simple, but if there's a disjointedness between where we are currently at and the information we're going to hook into, we must overcome that gap first. It's kind of like I've been talking about when there's a gap between where we currently are now and the predominant experience of reality we're living in and our ideal reality. It usually takes some amount of time to merge those two, to basically become rooted in to that ideal self physically. Just like if you're in a difficult place and your emotional state is perturbed, maybe you're experiencing depression, anxiety, confusion, lethargy, you name it, irritation. Well, that's a big one these days. Irritation. Everyone's fucking triggered. Then, hearing something like attitude is everything, it might be a little bit of a deterrent. You might, yeah, I know that, but like, I don't care. Because, well, it's not your experience right now, or it's kind of poking in that wrong place. And it's okay. I mean, I sure go through the emotional spectrum in a day. However, there's more and more time spent in a state of innovation, It's the only way I can call it. It's like a new space. It's the space of invention of like anything is possible. That's how I describe that feeling of like, it's just so like easeful. Anything is possible. It's light, it's sparkly. I can see many different possibilities and they all look great. There's one that will actually come into form, but it's nice to look at all of them. That's my personal subjective opinion of this. Some people like a different state, and when I do the workshops that I run quite regularly, link below, that's the whole point of the workshop, is to tap you back into that state of being and to get back into that beautiful flowy state, that state that's, like what's the princess and the pea. It's like there's that pea under like 49 mattresses, and like you got to take off the mattresses to get down to it, to uncover that, to reveal it. And sometimes we're just not in touch with it. Sometimes we go years without being in touch with it. And that's where the pain comes from in life, is not being in touch with that part of us that sits at the core of our being. I recently did another podcast episode that you probably caught if you follow me regularly, about how I had a revelation a few weeks ago when I met a friend in Singapore who revealed to me this system of working with sidereal, true sidereal versus tropical astrology for gene keys and human design and astrology as well. Now, what I found fascinating about this was the revelations that came after he showed me this. And so that was the part that was like, wow, like my world has just been shaken in a beautiful way. And from there, there's sort of these rippling afterwards that I'm just like, wow, this is really like beautiful to experience, sort of where my consciousness goes after having been exposed to this. And what I came to realize is that some people, like, they don't like these systems, by the way. There's some people that are just like, like human design, astrology, gene keys, those are like, yeah, you don't need those. Those are for like your describing your false self, or, like, I've already grown beyond those. Well, that's great. It's great if you're a purist and you can just tap into your purest expression. Unfortunately, people like me are intellectually hardwired. As a result of that, there's some benefits that come with being intellectually hardwired. One of them is that you can navigate complicated systems in society with greater ease. That, people of pure beingness usually go, oh, I don't want to be looking at this right now. I don't want to be doing taxes. I don't want to be doing spreadsheets. For somebody like myself, it is quite easy to navigate that world. And, the challenging part is getting the mind on board for remaining for prolonged periods of time in a state of invention or state of freedom. Because the mind can get distracted easily. So in a way, the mind needs to be rooted in something that it can contemplate, something that it can work with, that it can chew on for a bit. And that's how you get past the gatekeeper of the mind. If you're intellectually hardwired like myself, if you're one of those people of pure beingness, I commend you. I know several of you. And it's a lot easier to get by. However, if you're like me, you need some things to distract. I shouldn't say distract, to engage the mind. The mind gets such a bad rap because in many ways, the image, or, the fall from grace, came by implanting a suggestion into the mental body. So it was through the mind that the image formed. The image, of course, is the thing we've bought into for millennia and millennia that's being ripped away rather quickly. And the image self, I feel like there's so many things, systems that tell us about this, and they describe, like tropical astrology, for instance, describes the image self and breaking free of that. And once you reach a certain stage in that process, it stops really working for you because it's meant to be the get out of jail card. It's meant to tell you about your existence in the matrix. What I'm interested in is the existence outside of the matrix and how that becomes more embodied. And so that embodiment process is interesting because it can be intellectual. And I think this is the trickier part, because people like myself can easily get caught up in details and systems that are irrelevant, or we get attached to things that don't kind of move with the transient nature of reality. As a result of that, we can get a bit too rigid or fixed on things. So what's important is to be fluid with this embodiment process, but also keeping the mind sufficiently engaged. I look at some of the people out there that follow like a tantric path, for instance. Like, they basically just go embodiment. It's just about the body, and it's just like, wow, that's great. People can get there very, very quickly, and some people that were maybe even previously identified as intellectually driven can somehow bypass the mind, which I think is great. But if you cannot bypass the mind, if you're like me and the mind needs to be a part of the equation, then you need something that the mind can be on board with. Something that is fluid in nature. And that's where contemplation is beautiful, because contemplation has no single point of rigid truth. Contemplation is a continuous unfolding, a continuous blossoming into greater layers of understanding, and layers that understanding that can shift and merge the lens in which we're perceiving reality. So it keeps the mind engaged, and it allows us to find embodiment in the moment. In the present moment, as I said, is transient in nature. So that process allows us to have the right attitude. And how I define the right attitude isn't necessarily like fake positivity, and I'm definitely not a fake positivity person. If anything, I'm sardonic and sarcastic inside, and inspired. But it allows us to transmute the grit that arises until the things out there stop having a triggering effect on us. And so once the things out there stop having a triggering effect upon us, we can stay attentive and present to what we need to do without wasting energy, without getting distracted, and without veering off course, which, in my opinion, are three reasons why our greatness gets stifled. Is that we might begin with the right attitude, but it changes over time as we get caught up in the triggers, get distracted by the triggers, and they cause us to eventually veer off course. So the solution for that is whatever path we choose, whether it's one that is just becoming more embodied, and some people just drop into the body and that's it. Other people, like myself, we need to get the mind on board. So we need some sort of a contemplative muse to help us with that. And when that finally comes on board, then we can transmute. I often think that, it's not bad or good, by the way, to be just like intellectually wired or more sort of, I guess you call it more emotionally wired. There's the people who they don't really need an intellectual path. They just kind of go within, or they become expressive with their emotions. But it's more of the path of um, purity through faith versus um, illumination through knowledge. And again, the knowledge should come within. Maybe there's some external um, tidbits out there, but those tidbits are just a starting point for unraveling the layers upon layers upon layers of contemplation that can happen underneath the surface. And the mind is a very powerful tool. I mean, it can be used to solve great problems. We use it to communicate. I've got a tremendous sense of linguistics. It's not like it's complete liability to be intellectually wired. It's got its perks. Um, at the same time, it can make the inner states a little bit more challenging. Generally, they've done studies and they've shown that people with a higher IQ are generally less happy. So as much as society praises IQ, um, it's a flawed metric, because yes, IQ is great for like science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Great. It's great for, law and like, a lot of the things that kind of keep the mechanics of the 3D system running. Sure. And sure, if there's a direct correlation between expertise and salary, you could make the claim that, oh, you get paid more if you're smarter, but that's not actually true. And that smarter people often suffer more because they're always doubting themselves. They're always very hard on themselves. If you haven't noticed, the mind is one heck of a critic. And I feel like it's because that image came in through the mind that the inner critic, or the part that wants to keep us in the system, is very much derived in the mind, and it's just had its effect on our emotional body and our physical body. But the actual imprint of that, or the source of that, is in the mental body. And so as a result of that, we cannot exactly trust the mind in its default state. And that's why, you know, luminaries like Carlos Castaneda said, you've got to stock your mind. You've got to stock your thoughts. You've really got to weed out what is the source of this thought that's coming in. It's funny because yesterday I actually made a newsletter post and a Facebook post about this experience I had meeting my friend in Singapore and learning about true sidereal astrology from him in a very short period of time. And it got a lot of engagement. And, people were throwing all sorts of things out there. So some people were saying, this is great. Oh my God, I want to learn more. Some people were saying, astrology and human design are all part of the false self anyway, and there's no point in looking at this. Some people were saying, like, no, the true sidereal system doesn't work, and here's why. you know and so you get this mixed bag of different opinions. You have the people who are just like, this is great, like, they're kind of just going along and they're just being generally supportive. You have the people who are dismissive of systems altogether. Then you have the experts in the field who basically are going to refute you on some sort of technical basis. And then you have the people who don't believe in this stuff and think it's woo woo and fluff all the time. And so you get all of this at once. And where does the mind go when you get like this? Well, the mind doesn't say, hey, there's people that love me and there's people showing me lots of like appreciation. No, it's like, oh, you're just, you're messed up. You're using this regressive system because like you're not evolved enough. That's what the mind says. Or like you're doing it all wrong and you should have never posted that because look at what these experts are saying. They're clearly right. They're using complicated words. Or maybe you're just making this all up because like, these people over here are just saying that this is woo woo nonsense anyway. You know what? Like, this is how much time and energy gets wasted from these triggers. I caught it. caught that dialogue, and I said, you know what? You're very clever, mind. And I'm not going to let you derail me here. Because actually what's happening is something is opening up. And that what is really going on is going to cast a shadow. And if I stay fixed on the shadow, I can interpret it as a negative thing, or I can look at the beautiful thing that's coming into form, into actualization here. And so I choose to look at that instead. And what that is, by the way, is I'm not a full-time astrologer, human design reader. I have a system that I've developed called Trifecta that answers very specific questions that gets people into the right relationship with certain aspects of their lives to then be taken through the next steps. And so what I've done here is I've pieced something and figured out something and had illumination about something that works for me. And life is showing me, yes, indeed, you're onto something. And now there's another step. And so once you understand these things and can contemplate them, the next step is the ability to actually do something about them on a quantum level. I call it quantum rebalancing. And quantum rebalancing is basically once you're aware of the core wound or the shadow side of your expression of your true desires, because it's not coming out as the way you wanted, it's coming out as a shadow. You then are aware of what those parameters are that's causing it to be like that. And you can actually dig into that and you can go into a deeper state of awareness, and you actually change the imprint and begin to attenuate the momentum that's moving in that direction that's veering you off course. So you could say this is a healing process, but it's more of a corrective process. Because whatever that thing was, that imprint was probably rightful at a certain time and place. But like human beings often do, we grab something and we contract around it. And it's that contraction process that actually causes problems. Because when we contract, we're holding on to something and we're no longer moving with the greater flow of life. So it's very simple, and again, as complicated as us intellectually wired people can make it, the process is, and the people who are, advocating for just a more simple embodied approach are right. We just need to soften and not contract. The problem is that the mind, if we're intellectually wired, contracts like a mofo. It contracts hard. So you say soften, and it's like doesn't know what to do. So that's why we soften it with the right information that becomes seeds of contemplation, where it goes, oh, okay. And then it begins to let go and expand. For me, I learned a lot about this system. It's beautiful. I learned a lot that all I need to do for my business to thrive is to express the things that I truly enjoy through writing and communication. Much of the rest will be taken care of. That's it. And the nature of the communication is around higher wisdom or bigger concepts as opposed to technical, smaller details. That was, believe it or not, that sounds pretty general, but when I read that for myself, it lands because I can get caught up in so many other things that I don't enjoy, but I think are important. It's beautiful. Anyway, so I'm going to get back to that. So I would then take that and then I would contemplate that. And then I would look at, okay, what aspects of myself need rebalancing to bring out more of the passion around elements of the higher mind and higher wisdom that I want to express? Or what can I use to break down the resistance to getting these things out there? Because actually one of the hardest things in my day-to-day thing is when I look at all the things I have to do, it's reply to people that have contacted me on WhatsApp, Facebook, Signal, email, post something, or create a spreadsheet. I'll be like, I'm going to go to the spreadsheet. Believe it or not, I have resistance doing the exact thing that's I love doing. And so with podcasting, I've just made a commitment every, Thursday afternoon, a podcast is born. And so what I do is I show up for it. I enjoy this when I get into it. I think most people would agree. The thing that I have resistance to, it's once you get them to do it, once you sit them down with the paintbrushes and the canvas, they're fine. It's getting to that point that's the challenge. So that's the point. That's the thing that we need to quantumly rebalance, is that thing that causes the resistance that we waste energy upon to procrastinate and not do the thing that we're supposed to do. Because when we do the thing we're supposed to do, it's easy and life works out. Then, after that, we're still carrying around a lot of baggage from the past. And mentally, that's kind of wired into our emotions based on the story we're telling ourselves. But we can rewrite that story any way we want. And when we rewrite that story, we reframe it in a light of greater consciousness. What ends up happening is we change our past. We no longer carry the burdens of the past with us. Very important. No longer carrying the burdens of the past with us. Then, now that we're clear, we understand what our direction is, we've started to raise the frequency too around our life path, our core wounding, our sense of prosperity. The frequency's been raised here because we've actually done something about it. We've actually brought it back into balance, and we've actually framed it in a light that serves us. Now we can actually, this is where a lot of my shamanic training from the last 20 years, I started with shamanism when I was about 19, by the way. That was shamanic journeying. Yes, in the early days, I did a bunch of plant medicine, but I outgrew that pretty quickly. By the time I was like, I think 24, I just never really resonated with it after that point. But shamanic journeying, definitely, because it's a process, it's a muscle within each of us to access the multi-dimensions. And when we're in shamanic state of awareness, we can access different things like what we're here to do, like information regarding different facets of reality. We're basically tapped into the Akashic ocean at that point. So we can relate to things that are non-physical, such as our life work. That is an entity that wants to be born through us. You know, talk to anybody and let's say the creative process, when you're creating something, you're giving birth to it. It's not a physical birth like a baby, but it's a metaphysical birth. It is an energetic birth. And any project or creation we make does grow legs. It does take on a life of its own. And if it gets big enough at some point, you know, it can go and live on its own. Like there's people who start businesses and then like leave and like the business just keeps going, without them. Like, Elon Musk and PayPal. It's like he's got nothing to do with PayPal. PayPal has become its own thing now. Might not be the best analogy for this audience, but I think you know what I'm talking about here. So, we can actually give birth to something because this thing has life. And so when we talk to it, we figure out what it needs. Because if we want to give birth to something that's in alignment with our deepest passions and joy, well, we can. And I'd much rather see people give birth to their dreams than live with regret of never fulfilling their dreams or never going to that place. And then finally, the last step is actually awakening the dream, is actually bringing the whole thing to life and actually laying the steps between where we are now and where we want to be. Pretty simple roadmap, right? Use this system of contemplation to figure out the areas that are holding you back in terms of your core wounding, your life path, and your prosperity. Fix them on a quantum level. Rewrite your story so you're no longer carrying around baggage. Meet the thing that has the most importance to you. Meet the people that are going to, your soul family, essentially. And then awaken the dream. 6 steps. Could be easier than that. There's a secret. By the way, I'm playing with this. So I am actually wanting to take a group of people through this process that I've been using individually with myself and clients for years. Now is the time that I want to actually, I don't want to say systemize it, but I want to do this with a group of people, and I want to create that group energy that's just so potent. And I don't have anything fancy set up for this. I do landing pages and stuff. It literally just came through. It's just like, do this, Dave. So I listen. And so I'm putting it out there, and I'm not really like premeditating any of the stuff that comes out. Actually, when I do these solo podcasts, I basically go, how empty can I be? Hit record. Let's go. Let's just see what comes through. I hope it's good. I get more messages on these ones than I do when I try to premeditate them. In the beginning, a couple of years ago, I used to script these. I used to like have bullet points on the screen, and I used to only do audio versions, so you couldn't see me looking up and down at the microphone. It was pretty funny. I'm sure you could tell, or some people could tell, that there was a pace to the thing. But at a certain point, I just got very comfortable talking and going on. And I understand sometimes that there's tangents that occur, but that's cool because the thing I'm following isn't exactly a logical progression of words. The thing I'm following is the currents of internal expression that are becoming externalized. And so naturally, I'm going to follow those. And when it feels like I should shift directions, and the direction shifts. And that again wraps back into this whole thing that attitude is everything, right? Because this form of expression, in a way, controls my attitude. When I express myself, I generally feel better. When I get a piece of content out to people out there, I feel better. So for me, if I want to feel better, I'm just going to create things. And so committing to do this podcast, and then the thing I was saying earlier is that this is also the area that I face the greatest resistance. And funny enough, this actually shows up in my updated trifecta with this true sidereal. Is it says that like there's this element of being the forgotten one. And when I read that and I was like contemplating that, I'm like, holy geez, like that hits the nail on the head. It's so easy for me to just kind of like feel like the forgotten one as opposed to be the one that's, a little bit more visible, but not attached to what I'm creating. So it's visible and mindful, you could say. Yeah, and by the way, um, I'm also playing around with this calculator. And the calculator again, it's to help you understand the first stage in this is your core wounding, your life purpose, and your prosperity. And that is the stage of this larger system that I'm creating as well. But this is the first stage, and I'm actually building this calculator now. And what I've decided to do is create. I'll give you a reading by donation because with each reading, I get to actually like tweak the calculator a little bit more. And so that's why I'm not like, charging a fixed price. It's by donation. Um, it's in beta, but that also means you get more of my time and attention. So I'm not going to give you something that's wrong. It's just not pretty. So anyway, if you're interested, I'm going to put a link below so you can check that out. You can, you can join me on this adventure as I build this thing out. And like I'm saying, it's like you don't have to throw away the old readings if you've ever done, a tropical astrology reading or trifecta reading with me before. It's not wrong. It's just that this one has a higher resolution of accuracy for people who are more consciously on a path and have broken out of many elements of their false identity. So I hope you can see the difference because human design, actually, what I'm learning is actually something that describes what we should eat, how we should sleep, where we should be, according to our 3D earthly existence. So in many ways, I don't think it's super appropriate to use true sidereal for human design 100% of the time. For astrology and gene keys, when we're trying to get into the more contemplative material that's going to anchor us to where we want to be, definitely. Human design, verdict is still out. And I actually had a great discussion with somebody around this the other day. But anyway, all things aside, why am I talking about this? Why does it sound complicated, not contemplative? Because it makes me happy. And attitude is everything, right? So you do the thing that gives you a magnetic, shiny attitude. If you haven't noticed too, like go outside and look at people that are shiny and then ask them like, if good things happen in their life? They'll generally say yes. Even if they're going through hard times, they'll generally say yes. And, people who might be hustling and grinding and doing all sorts of complicated stuff and self-restricting and all these things, and they look like they're keeling over, well, they're unnecessarily making it hard. So really, the doing part, and I've said this many times in many different ways, doing is important. We can't just lie around and manifest a website, or we can't just lie around and manifest things. It's true, if you sit there with enough focus, you might get somebody knocking on your door that's the perfect fit. You're going to meet, people by chance, absolutely. But at some point, there's going to be an idea that pops into your head to go and do something. And when we go and do that thing, that's where the magic happens. But if we don't tap in first and we just start doing things, what are we doing those things rooted in? Are we doing those things rooted in a fear or stress response? If we do something rooted in something, we're going to get more of that thing. So if we do something rooted in a fear or stress response, we're going to get more fear and stress, right? If we do something that's rooted in the realm of invention, in the realm of true possibility, we're going to get more invention and true possibility happening. If it's done in the spirit of abundance and prosperity, we're going to get more abundance and prosperity happening. And so that's why those bright and shiny people are bright and shiny and generally have good things happen and things are simpler. And that's why people who are overcomplicated and spinning their wheels and burnt out tend to attract situations that create more of that. And so this makes us ask from time to time, it makes us take a good look at our life and saying, okay, what are the things we're engaged with right now? Where were they rooted in when I chose to do this? And I guarantee that when we drill down, we'll see some things probably were rooted in that fear. Other things were rooted in true inspiration that have just not come to blossom yet. I'll leave you with that. This has been a good podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. And there's links below to, if you want to participate, if you want to be help me with this app and get some very interesting revelations about your core wounding, life purpose, or sense of prosperity. There's a link below. If you want to join the next masterclass, there's a link below to that too. All right, folks, take care. Talk soon.